Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for Change Your Mind, Change Your World. My name is Shannon Lee, and we're going to make maybe another 60 seconds to see how many other folks log on. We have 33 registrants for this morning. And so just in case folks are running behind, I am going to wait just a minute. No worries, though. We will finish on time. The sooner I recognize it, the sooner I can reduce the pain that I'm in. So let's dive in to the content. I want you to know that we are recording today's session. The only people that would have access to this recording will be those of you who have signed up for this session. I do also want to let you know the recording in its entirety. I do want to let you know that from time to time, we use clips from things that I say on these recordings for our social media and for our emails, but we do not use clips of if any of you end up speaking on this Zoom, and we do not do that unless it's something really good and we get your written permission. So I always like to let people know that because privacy is always of concern when we're doing all of these things virtually. So once again, welcome to Change Your Mind, Change Your World. Today we're going to cover why supervising your thoughts is important. And you may have never thought about managing or supervising your thoughts, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. How do we supervise? We're busy supervising others maybe, or supervising children or pets. Some of us might feel like we supervise our significant other. I don't know, no judgment, but how much time do we spend supervising what's going on here? And this is where we have most of our power. And then we want to understand our cycles of thought. What do the cycles of thought produce for us? Good, bad, and indifferent. How do we halt cycles, that don't serve you? How do you do that? And how do we do it in a way that's non-judgmental, that is not damaging to self, and that is accepting of ourselves? Because a lot of us try to halt cycles by denying them and resisting them and telling oneself that we're bad. And so we're going to talk about how we halt them in a way that's formative, in a way that is useful and removes judgment. And then finally, how do we start cycles that do serve ourselves and ultimately will help us better serve the world around us? So why would we even bother thinking about our thinking? Well, first of all, I believe that thinking about your thinking is the most powerful tool at your disposal. It's the thing that nobody can take away from you. It is the thing that if you learn how to do it, it is available to you regardless of your race, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, period. It's just a matter of knowledge. And once you know this thing, that is something that you can activate and leverage for the rest of your life, no matter what is going on in your life. That is why it is so powerful. It's something that whether you are having a great year financially or a not so great year financially, you always have this tool. Nobody can take this away from you. Number two, supervising the thoughts in your brain is the most control you have over your results. Now, I'm not saying that if you do X, you will always get Y. But what I will share later is when we don't supervise our thoughts, we often or more often get the results we don't want. And then we're left wondering, why does this always happen to me? And so supervising your thoughts gives you more control, or I should say, maybe even more influence over the results that you get in your life and at work. And then finally, the last why is that simplifying this process, I believe, inspires people and equips them to grow, to improve. Because again, regardless of what's going on in your life, whether or not your employer invests in your development, this is something you can always do for yourself, which puts you in the driver's seat of your own growth and development. All right, so this model that I've referred to a couple times, I lovingly call the hula hoop of change. I chose the hula hoop as the imagery for this because I believe that when we're in a vicious cycle, or whether we're in a vicious cycle or a virtuous cycle, it becomes self-regenerating. It goes on and on and on unless we do something intentional to disrupt it. And I'm going to describe what I mean by vicious and virtuous in a moment. Now, the idea that something happens and then we have a thought and a feeling and an action is not new. This is not something that I invented. What I came up with was a way to think about it in a different way in a cycle. More often, the way I've seen it is like in a line, like think, feel, act. And that's not wrong. It's just that this ended up being much more helpful to me because it helped me understand why I feel stuck sometimes. And it's because it's going round and around and around like your washing machine. Now, when you're in a vicious cycle, what that means is you might have an event in your life, and the thoughts, feelings, and actions that are occurring are damaging to you, they're damaging to others, and they're not getting you the results that you say you want. That's a vicious cycle. And by the way, we're all going to be in a vicious cycle. Even if you learn this and you get it down pat, you're going to experience a vicious cycle again. This is not a panacea that prevents the vicious cycle. It is a model and a pattern that can help you disrupt the vicious cycle and more quickly move into a virtuous cycle. A virtuous cycle is when we disrupt the vicious cycle and create an environment in our thinking, feeling, and acting that not only gets us closer to the results that we want, or maybe it's even just okay that it moves us further away from the results we didn't want. But more importantly, because results are nice, outcomes are nice. But more importantly, my hope for you is that in learning this, that what's going on the inside of you will be less damaging to yourself. And as a result, your actions and results will be less damaging to others. And that's really my motivation here. Because how many times have you ever thought, why do I keep saying that? Or why do I keep doing that? What's wrong with you? Or do you ever feel like you're stuck in a thought pattern of negativity and you're stuck in a place where you know it's damaging to yourself? We're going to refer to that instead of saying it's good or bad. We want to really hone in on these words productive and unproductive. Now, when I talk about productive or unproductive, what I'm not referring to is what you're getting done. Okay. I'm not referring to how much work you get done or how good you do at the hula hoop of change. What I'm referring to is if something's productive, it's in the virtuous cycle and it's moving you closer to three things. So if you're taking notes, I want you to write these three things down. It's moving you closer to these three things. Number one, it's moving you closer to who you want to be, your ideal self. My ideal self is always out in front of me because as soon as I improve in a certain area, I always see something else I can improve on in the future. And so I always want to be thinking, is this in alignment with that ideal Shannon that I see out there in the future? And then number two, it's more productive when it's in alignment with how I want to show up today. So who do I want to be right now? And then number three, when it's in alignment with the values I say that I hold. So it's a productive pattern. The thought is productive. The feeling is productive and the action is productive if they are aligned with who I want to be, how I want to show up today, and my stated values. Now, we could spend an entire 2 hours just on helping you develop your set of values. So if you don't already have them, that's something you could work on with a coach or with a colleague. We're not going to do that today. That's going to be one of our big assumptions. And I'm going to call out certain values that I think a lot of people hold here and there, or maybe talk about a couple of my own, and help you understand why we might have a value of X, But over here, our behavior doesn't align with it. Right? And this isn't about perfection. I'm not worried about, we're all going to fail, we're all going to mess up, we're all going to fall short. But if the vast majority of time I'm saying this is my ideal, I'm saying this is my value, but the vast majority of the time my behavior is down here, there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. There's a disconnect, and it has to do with this hula hoop. So you're in the middle of this hula hoop. And I love thinking about an actual hula hoop of like you're working it, you're spinning it, right, with your hips. And if we had more room, maybe I would get mine out and I would show you. But I won't do that today because I have a really small real estate here where my desk is. And we're going to talk about the fact that other people have hula hoops too, but you get to be in charge of your hula hoop. You do not, no matter how much you want to and how much you believe you can make a difference, you do not get to be in charge of other people's hula hoop. So I'd like to walk you through this hula hoop. Before I do that, I just want to check chat and see if anyone has any questions or comments for me this far based on the little introduction that I gave. I'm just going to pause for a moment. Any questions? And by the way, you don't have to wait for me to prompt you for questions. If something occurs to you while I'm talking, thank you. Throw it in there. And when I take a pause, I'll get to it. I get a notification when there's chat. So feel free to, don't wait to be prompted if something occurs to you. Okay. So we all have events in our life, or you could call them circumstances. And we all have two kinds of events in our lives. You're like, what? No, Shannon, there's a lot. No, really. There's events that you have control over, you can do something about, and then there's events that you can't do anything about. Notice that the event is totally separate from your result. It's totally separate from your actions, your feelings, and your thoughts. An event can be things like what family you were born into, where in the country you live or lived, the color of your skin, your socioeconomic status then and now. If someone called you a bad name, if you got fired, if you lost your job and can't pay your rent, if you are wealthy. There are all kinds of events in our lives that we played a role in and some that we didn't play a role in. Sorry about that. And what I want you to know, first of all, is the first thought that we have about that event has to do with the meaning that we give that event. The meaning that we give that event. And this happens just almost simultaneously. Something happens and we react. And then we have a thought, and that thought creates a feeling, and that feeling inspires our action. And our actions largely give us our results. And so what I find is that we have the false belief, we operate under the false belief that our results make us feel the way we feel, or an event is making us feel the way we feel. And what I want you to understand is your feelings come from your thoughts. And I want to prove it to you right now. This is not scientific proof, by the way. So, all right, I'm gonna just pick a person here. I'm gonna pick Jamie. Now, if I say this to you, Jamie, I say, I love you, Jamie. I want you to tell me in chat, or you can speak, you can unmute if you'd like. Do you literally feel love right now? Do you feel that love that I just put out there? You're still muted if you're talking.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yes, I do. I do
That's
feel.
wonderful. Most people say they don't.
I think probably because I've met you before. I don't know.
That might be helpful. Maybe I should pick someone who doesn't know me, which is tough because I recognize just about every name on here, except for two. One person I don't know that I've met, and the other person has a number. But here's the thing: if you go up to a stranger and say, "I really love you," the only way they're going to feel love is if they associate love as a meaning in that like my emotions, my feelings don't leap out of me into you. And we understand that when it comes usually to positive feelings. I remember, and maybe some of you can identify with unrequited love, and maybe you were the one that wasn't giving it back. And someone told you sometime in your life romantically that they loved you or that they wanted to be with you, and you just didn't feel the same way. Well, why is that? Just because someone has a feeling doesn't mean that you have the feeling too, because that's not where feelings come from. Your feelings don't come from someone else's hula hoop. It comes from your hula hoop. And what's upstream of your feelings are your thoughts. And your thoughts are generated quite automatically, at least initially, by the meaning you give an event. So Jamie felt love, but most other people I say that to don't feel love when I say that. Some people feel distrust when they hear that word, because why? The meaning that we give something and the thought that happens as a result is largely influenced by a lot of things: how we were raised, our how we were parented, um, our automatic programming, personality, trauma. All of these things inform the way we interpret an event in our life. And that interpretation is not factual, it is experiential. And this is not your fault. This is just the way our brains work. And this isn't my opinion. This has been studied for decades, that this is the cascade of what happens in our brain. And so that's why two people can experience the same thing and have different thoughts and feelings about it, different reactions to it, take different actions. If I was raised, let's say, in poverty, which I was, and someone gave me $100,000, the meaning that I apply to that and the thought that I have around that, believe it or not, would have been fear. Why? You'd think someone raised in poverty would be really excited about getting, no one's ever done this, by the way. I'm open to the gift, but no one's ever done this. But before I knew about this process, my initial reaction would be a thought of, oh no, I don't want that money, because what if I don't want to know what it feels like to have it and lose it, to have it and not have it. And so that would create a feeling of fear in me. And that would dictate what I do with that money, the actions I take with that money in one way or another. Someone else could receive that money and they have a different experience with money. And it doesn't mean that they had to have been raised or not been raised in poverty, but the way we were raised and what we experienced as children largely dictates the way we experience our world. And what I want you to understand more than anything is it's just your experience. It doesn't make it factual. And the reason why that's good news is because you can choose a different way to interpret it. But you have to be intentional. It has to be brought to the conscious, and you have to make different choices around that. And so when I have that thought, the thought immediately creates a feeling. And I want to pause and move here to the feelings wheel. I love this feelings wheel. There's lots of them. If you go out into Google and just Google feelings wheel, you can find lots of different versions of this. And a couple things to note about the feelings wheel, any of them, this is true. Anything on the outside rung is less intense than the middle rung, which is less intense than the center. But it's super helpful because when you look at something like discouraged over here on the top, kind of like at the 2 o'clock here, discouraged is a less intense version of rejection, which comes from being scared or fear. Oh, thank you, Angela. Most of the ones you've seen are mostly negative feelings in the center. Yeah, this one's half and half. That's a good thing to point out. Yeah, we've got peaceful, powerful, joyful, and then sad, mad, scared. And a good reason, another reason I like this is because I do believe life is not literally, but figuratively, I think it's about 50-50. I think it's normal for us to have good feelings and bad feelings, positive feelings and negative feelings. But you know what? We humans, we are so wired for pleasure that what ends up happening is we do something very damaging to ourselves when we feel the negative feeling. We judge it. So when something happens and we feel embarrassed or overwhelmed or stupid or isolated or frustrated, many of us, what we do is we immediately say, "Ooh, I shouldn't feel that way. That's bad." And the first thing I want you to learn today is this: when you have a bad feeling, the quickest way for it to turn damaging is for you to judge it and to resist it. Carl Jung says what we resist persists, and I believe that that's true. That's why we keep experiencing it over and over again. I want you to remember this. Every time you feel one of those bad feelings, and there are lots here to look at, and there's other feelings wheels that gives you other words to kind of see which ones resonate with you. I want you to practice saying this out loud if you have to. I welcome the feeling of of feeling distant. I welcome feeling discouraged. I welcome feeling isolated. I welcome feeling apathetic. I welcome this feeling of guilt, of shame, of fear, of anger, of sadness. Now, that seems a little counterintuitive to do that, because why would we welcome something that feels bad? Well, let me ask you this. If your child is sick in the hospital, or if you lose a loved one and they die, do you feel sad? You might even feel angry or scared. Yes, you feel bad about those things, right? Unless you're a monster. Those feelings are okay. You can endure bad feelings and welcome them and be okay. You don't have to push them away and get rid of them. You can welcome them. And let me tell you something, the more you welcome them, they end up just washing over you like a wave. And when we welcome them, that wave gets shorter and shorter. Imagine if you've ever been to the ocean and you know what it's like to kind of just be on a floaty or in a wave pool maybe. And if not, try to imagine, get in your bathtub tonight and kind of move the water. I don't know. But the wave is just kind of a rocking, right? Our emotions are the same way. And in like manner, the good emotions don't last either. So life is a mixture of good and bad emotions. So we're not saying that you're in a vicious cycle when you have a feeling that is bad. I'm saying you're in the vicious cycle when you have a feeling that is damaging. And feelings become damaging when we resist them, when we don't acknowledge them, and when we try to buffer and avoid them. Put in chat what you think I mean by buffer, or behaviors that you think look like buffering emotions. What are some buffering behaviors, or what does buffering look like, do you think? Just make a guess. There's no really right or wrong answers, but there's some top 3 that I want to make sure we hit on. Because sometimes we don't know when we're in the vicious cycle. And I want to give you lots of ways in your thinking and feeling and acting to maybe see, ooh, I'm right in the middle of one right now. And buffering is one way to know. Ignoring, disguise. Yep. What are some observable behaviors? some additional observable behaviors that might help us know that we're buffering our emotions or we're buffering a feeling. I know one that I used to engage in a lot was outbursts. Some people buffer through shopping. Some people buffer through drinking. Some people buffer through overeating. Now, am I saying that if someone's having a glass of wine that they're buffering? No. But if I'm feeling a certain way and going, man, I need a drink to try to get rid of my own feelings and to buffer from my feelings, that's not a productive way for me to utilize alcohol. Same thing with eating. And what I find, especially when I coach people who are struggling with, I just don't know how to, I'm having all these cravings, and craving is bad and it's something I have to resist. Instead, I recommend people embrace the craving and welcome it and allow it to wash over them like a wave, because it will end. You can feel a difficult thing and do nothing about it. You don't have to act on it. You don't have to buffer it. You don't have to try to control it. So, feelings, however, left unchecked and left unsupervised, give us certain actions. We act in a certain way, and our actions give us our repeated results. And then our results create a new set of circumstances or events in our life. So let's take the event of we are in a meeting and and those of you who have heard me talk about this before, you've probably heard this story before. But I want you to put yourself in the story. So you're in a meeting and your boss has asked you to prepare a presentation to present it in this staff meeting that takes place, let's say, every week. And you put in a ton of time. It's the first time you've been asked to present at the staff meeting and you want to make a good impression. So here you are and you give your presentation and you think you did a bang up job. And you look over almost quite automatically, like many of us would, and you're waiting for feedback from your boss who asked you to do this. And here's what you see. Your boss is buried in her phone. Boom, event. In a vicious cycle, the first thought might be something like this: how disrespectful and rude. If my first thought was how disrespectful and rude, what feeling do you think that might create? Put that in the chat. What feeling? Just pick something from here at any intensity. What feeling might that create? If I say to myself, my boss is disrespecting me, my boss is being rude to me, what feeling does that create? Anger, feeling inadequate. I like that one. You notice the next word after inadequate, Jamie, is submissive. Submissive is a weird feeling. And I love on the feelings wheel that it's considered a negative feeling. Hurt. Yes. Where you fall on here is going to depend on a lot of different things. And the why is a little less important. The what is what I'm getting at. And we've got anger, inadequacy, hurt, and all of these things are kind of hovering in the angry and scared category, right? If we look at the core. Okay. Now, if I'm feeling angry, we're just going to pick one feeling. If I'm feeling anger, which by the way is a bad feeling or a negative feeling, but it may not be damaging yet. We'll see. But pardon me. If someone is feeling angry, what might they do in this scenario. We want to stay specific to this scenario. What might someone do? Get this in the chat. Give me an example of some actions that you might take if you think someone has been rude and you're feeling angry about it. What might be a resultant action that you take? Talk to a friend. That's wonderful, Angela. That's a perfect example of disrupting what could have turned into a vicious cycle, right? Getting counsel, talking it through. Now, talking it through with someone else could be damaging if it's gossip, right? And we're kind of ruminating, but that's not what you said. You could choose to talk to your boss in private. Yep, that's a choice. Looking for a new job, you could. Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you what the person in this scenario did. This is a real scenario with a real person. The action that they took was they withdrew from their boss. They withdrew. And they weren't ignoring their boss or not getting their job done, but they weren't engaging like they were before. They were kind of giving their minimum effort to keep their job. And the results, unbeknownst to them at the time, their boss was considering them for a raise and for a promotion. But the boss said, gosh, I've noticed, and I'm just going to put my name in here. I've noticed that Shannon has really pulled back her effort lately. And come to think of it, she hasn't been participating in staff meetings. She's just been sitting there quietly. Maybe now is not the right time for a promotion. And I didn't get the promotion. And now I had a new event. And guess what happened? My brain said, see, your boss disrespects you. And then that gave me feelings of, that created a bunch of other feelings. Then I felt insecure because I didn't get the promotion that I was hoping to get. I also felt a little depressed. I moved into sadness. And I was still angry at my boss. And so this cycle continued. And so my thought, the new event, which was brought on by my actions, which were inspired by my feelings and my original thoughts, was confirmed. And so my brain, which is, as Brene Brown says, is wired for story, my brain said, see, it's true. And so we believe the thoughts that we have are true because we have proof. But the proof is just true. The proof is just, or the results are just proof that our thoughts, feelings, and actions are giving us our results, not that the thought themselves are factual. So if I were to re-engineer this into a virtuous cycle, I might have the same thought. That was rude. I feel disrespected. But if instead I can disrupt it and say, okay, wait a second. I've been here before. Did these angry feelings create the results that I wanted? Now that's me taking radical responsibility for my own emotional environment and for the choices I made as a result of my emotional environment. Not blame, but responsibility. Well, it didn't work out well before. And so the new thought, I choose a thought that is in alignment with 4 things. The first 3 you already know. It's who I want to be, how I want to show up today, and my values. The 4th thing is I choose a thought I can believe. I choose a thought that feels just as true to me as they're being rude and disrespectful. And sometimes the new thought is a question. It's a curiosity. That's my, what I call super voodoo trick for getting out of the vicious cycle is curiosity. That's something else you'll want to write down. How do you get out of the vicious cycle? The quickest way, curiosity. I wonder. So for me, when the quickest way for me to move out of anger is wonder and curiosity. And so what I would say to myself in a virtuous cycle is, man, that seemed really rude and disrespectful. And I feel angry. I welcome that. That's interesting. And I'm going to get curious about it like a scientist, like an observer of it. Like, here's me, the Shannon that is Shannon, and then here's the feeling I am having. Because, see, I am not you are not your feelings. And I break this down in like very like detail in the book, that you are not the events of your life. You are not your thoughts. You are not your feelings. You are not your results. You have thoughts, you experience feelings, and you create results, but you are not those things. And so, in acknowledging and going, I allow that feeling of anger, and I'm going to allow it so that I can look at it and deal with it and observe it. And then I say, why am I angry? Because I feel disrespected. And then I say, does that feeling and does that thought serve me? Is it productive? Well, I don't know. Is it in alignment with who I want to be? Do I want to be distant from my boss? Do I want to be angry at people that I work with? Do I want to live with that? Because anger turns to resentment, which is damaging to self and others. So my answer was no, I don't. That's not who I want to be. Even if my boss meant to disrespect me, I still get to choose who I want to be. I still get to choose if I experience that as being rude and disrespectful. That's my choice. That's in my hula hoop. I get to choose then how that makes me feel. So instead, what I choose is curiosity. And when I choose curiosity, and I can't remember if curious is on here or not. I don't know, but it's kind of like, to me, curiosity fits into maybe like this powerful area. Because when I'm curious, I feel a lot more powerful, because when I'm curious, I have choices. And so curiosity causes me to feel, or causes me to act in this way, which is what a couple of you mentioned. I might go talk to my boss in private, but how I talk to my boss is going to be important. I would go to my boss and say, hey, you asked me to do this presentation. I did it. And I was curious about your reaction, because when I looked at you, you were very distracted. And that kind of feedback left me wondering if I did a good job or not, or if you were disappointed or what. Like, I was just very confused by that. And my boss said to me, oh my gosh, I totally meant to follow up with you, but I was on my phone that day because my grandmother was taken to the hospital in an emergency, and my family we were all on a group text, and I was totally distracted that day. It had nothing to do with you. Now I feel compassion. Now I feel relief. How else do I feel? Gosh, I would feel proud of the way I acted in that scenario. I would feel respected because now I know what really happened. And see, notice how this comes from a sense of power, not power over, but feeling empowered. And so my hula hoop was in that moment working as a virtuous cycle, because it was moving me towards something more productive. The event stayed the same. The initial thought and feeling were the same, because you don't have control over what initially happens. But as I interrupt this and observe it, somewhere down the line, I'm going to stop feeling disrespected when people don't pay attention to me. My brain's going to immediately go to something curious sometime in the future. Why? Because anything that we practice with repetition and duration becomes a new habit. You have been practicing, I said this already, but you have been practicing the way that you think your whole life. You have been practicing your emotional reactions your entire life. So you're not going to practice this hula hoop and everything be hunky dory. It takes practice. Now, I will tell you, once you start doing this, if you commit to it, you will feel more frustrated at first than anything. Why? Because you'll become acutely aware of how many of your thoughts are in that vicious cycle. Now, halting the vicious cycle takes intention and work. The shorthand is we're trying to take limiting thoughts. So thoughts like, I feel disrespected and I feel hurt and all those things are limiting because they don't give me anywhere to go. They cause me to feel stuck. So they're limiting to me. Typically, they create damaging feelings and unproductive habits, like in my case, withdrawal. Some people, when they get angry, they lash out, they yell, or they get physically violent. I don't know. And what we want to do is exchange those limiting thoughts for liberating thoughts. What's a liberating thought? Thoughts that give you choices, thoughts that give you options. In my original vicious cycle, you notice that I tend to, like, when I'm in the vicious cycle, I'm tending to default into victim mode. Victim mode says, well, I can't do anything about it. And they did this to me, so I'm going to do that. We're just on autopilot reacting. A liberating thought is, I wonder what's going on and I wonder what choices I have right now. And then I choose according to my values, according to who I want to be and how I want to show up. And when I have those liberating thoughts, what happens is I have more desirable feelings. You can feel two things at once. You can feel angry and then entertain a new feeling that's in alignment with who you want to be. And then when we do that, we create more productive habits. The last thing I want to share with you is when hula hoops collide, because let me tell you something, they do. But it's quite simple to think about now that you've seen the model. Okay. This is you on the right and someone else on the left. Yes, because a common question I get is, well, what about other people? They do certain things and it bothers me. I get it. I get it. But when someone else does something, their results may cause a new event for them, but it's just causing a new event for you too. You're still responsible for what's going on in here, but here's the mistake we make. The mistake we make is we think, first of all, that they are responsible for how we're thinking and feeling in our hula hoop, which is not true. That's us. We also may make the mistake of thinking that we can control how they feel, think, and act. How that shows up is, well, I don't want to tell my direct report that they didn't do a good job because I don't want them to be mad at me. I don't want to tell my coworker that they let me down with their project involvement because I'm afraid that they'll quit. I don't want to give this person a SMART goal because I'm afraid, and then we fill in the blank, fill in the blank. We believe that we have control over someone else's reactions. And the fact of the matter remains that whenever you interact with other people, you are simply exchanging events. That's all you're doing. Each of you has choices that you make around your thoughts, feelings, and actions. And I know what the next resistance is, but not everybody knows this. And you're right. But you're not responsible for that. You're not responsible for that. This keeps going. Yeah. All right. So we have just a few minutes left. Throw any comments or questions you have into the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. I can't remember if I put my, while you're doing that, I just want to let you know that we have lots of free learning opportunities at Relay. We do have a podcast called the Slapcast. You can find it anywhere podcasts are found. And just search for Relay Slapcast and you will find it. We have episodes that drop every other week. Sometimes I interview people. Sometimes it's just myself and my director of community engagement, Jason. Sometimes it's just the two of us. Sometimes it's just me. But I talk about all things leadership and weave in a ton of mindset because it's my favorite thing to talk about. We also have started doing free monthly workshops. You're on one of them right now. And as soon as we have, we're finishing up our Q1 offerings. And as soon as we have those ready and available, we'll get those out to you. So if you're not on our mailing list, you'll want to join the mailing list to make sure you're first to know about these free workshops once a month. And again, we'll always offer them at 9 a.m. and noon. And then if you'd like to reach me directly, you can reach me at shannonlee@relayleadership.org. And then this is the phone number, and I respond to calls and texts. You can even text me because it's a cell phone number. So yeah, I would love to hear from you. If you have any questions that maybe you think of after. And in the last little couple minutes here, I'll just let you know that if you ever have any questions about how you can work with us on any of these things or even coach with us, contact me at this email and I can answer all of your questions about that. I don't see any questions. I see lots of very kind comments. Thank you so much. A good brain tune up, absolutely. And this is something I tune up with probably on an every other day basis because my brain needs a lot of tuning. But I want to thank you all for your time and attention. And we'll go ahead and end this now. I'm going to stop recording before I forget. And again, just reach out if you have any questions about myself, about the organization, or anything that we've